Hi, Frank and Diana.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So we are streaming. We are live. Um, Wanted to let you all know that.
All right.
Okay. Hi. Team, you are muted.
Hello. Sorry, Rebecca is on the Zoom downstairs, so I'm gonna turn off the mic.
Okay. In just one moment, I'll start recording and then we can begin officially. Let's go ahead and get started. Sorry, I'm dealing with a little bit of bronchitis, so I apologize in advance. If you can't hear me, just let me know. Great. Gonna go ahead and record. Okay. Hello, Diana. Hello, Frank of Responsible Hedonist Wines. Welcome to our second ever interview via live stream on YouTube with Selection Massale. I'm going to be asking you some questions today, but as I wrote in the comments, everyone should feel free to comment with their own questions, and we'll get to those at the end of the discussion. So thank you for dialing in from New Zealand. And I will begin just by asking you a very basic intro question. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, your journey in wine and in life, and what brought you to this moment.
Yeah, I'll try to do that really quickly. So basically from Chicago, went to college out in California, where I kind of fell in love with wine. And then it kind of stuck with me throughout my kind of, early 20s and stuff for my first jobs. Always kind of kept coming back to wine, and then decided to kind of make the career switch from doing like technical sales into being a sommelier. So worked in a retail shop and then restaurants in Chicago, and then got interested in production. So making wine, kind of really nerdy questions that somms don't necessarily need to know, but I really wanted the answers to. So then decided to go back to school for winemaking and wine science. And that's kind of how I ended up down here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Came down here to do my master's and just kind of never left.
Yeah, and then so I grew up in Michigan, and I went to university to study like environmentalism, water quality type stuff. I had a job up in Traverse City, Michigan, and really kind of fell in love with wine up there. And I basically wanted a discount on wine, so I started working at a winery up there called Mobby, just so I can get a discount on sparkling wines. Just kind of like really fell in love with it. Then moved to Chicago, working still in the environmental consulting field, but then also just found a job doing a somm job in Chicago, and that's where I met Diana. And then she asked me if I wanted to move with her to out there in New Zealand, and yeah, decided to come along for the ride.
Amazing. So that brings up my next question, which is why New Zealand? What drew you there to do your master's, and what sort of kept you there once you arrived?
Yeah, I think being in Chicago, I was kind of lucky to be introduced to various wines from New Zealand. So I know everybody knows New Zealand's Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough, but where we worked at City Winery, Rachel Driver-Specken had a wine list that had lots of other wines from New Zealand. So things like Pinot Noir from Burn Cottage, Chardonnay from Kimi River and Mahi, and those really kind of like got me really interested in New Zealand wine. And then when I was looking at places to go for grad school, loved California, had a great time there for college, but I wanted to see something a little bit different. I wanted to study abroad. And so was looking at places where they speak English so I could take classes. And then also was I'm very worried about climate change, full disclosure. So I kind of overlaid maps of winemaking regions with climate projection maps. And so New Zealand's still got kind of a cool to moderate climate. It is obviously much warm, like everything is, but I wanted to kind of like experience that from a winemaking perspective. So that's kind of what led me here. Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, and then why don't we stay? I don't know. I really like it down here.
I think we really like the work-life balance here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and then the free healthcare is also really nice here too. So I mean, it's just the little bit of the change in lifestyle, kind of like we really enjoyed it here, and yeah, really quickly made a good community group here and things like that, and everybody's like really friendly in the wine industry as well.
Yeah. I think it's just everyone's just been really nice. It's pretty chill. I think the climate in Terroir is just really unique. And then a lot of our friends are just from kind of all over the world. And I kind of like that here. Yeah.
Cool. I remember when we met, one of the first things we were talking about was what you do in your downtime, and kayaking came up. And I was like, that sounds really nice. Casual kayak. Yeah, it's just building off of that community and the climate. How is it that you came to find the vineyards that you're working with? How did you select them?
Yeah, so basically, not from New Zealand, but I fell in love with Hawke's Bay, which is a wine region on the North Island. It's just a really cool area. I love the stories of the region. It's got all these braided rivers running through it, and stuff like that. But, you know, not being from there and wanting to make wine down there, you know, I kind of got on the phone and started calling some friends, and people who introduced me to other friends, and then just kind of via those connections, that was kind of how I got introduced to the people I'm working with. So I work with Hope's Grove Vineyard, the winemaker there, or vineyard owner and winemaker there is Peter Koopman. So I got introduced to him and told him I was looking for some fruit, and he's like, oh, well, you know, I work on this really cool plot of Chardonnay. Do you want to come take a look? And I did, and I was like, oh my God, this place is stunning. This is like exactly what I'm looking for. And then for the Syrah, kind of the same thing happened where I was actually at a harvest party at a brewery, and I met the person who manages the vineyard. And I didn't know that at the time, but we were just like talking over a beer about everything and nothing and winemaking and vineyard philosophies and stuff. And she was like, oh, well, you know, I manage a few vineyards. And I was like, sure, I'll take your card. And yeah, so that's kind of how I got connected with the two sites that I work with now. We're bringing on a third, hopefully next year. And again, just kind of met them at is that the blind wine tasting competition thing that we went to for industry, and just kind of really got along with them. And yeah, just always kind of trying to make new friends, and yeah, with similar philosophies. That's really important. So the vineyards that we work with are either farmed organically or certified organic, or on the process and path of being organic. So that's kind of important to me. Like my research that I was doing, and what interests me a lot is like microbial terroir, and this whole idea of how the yeast and the malolactic bugs and everything like that influence the aroma and the flavor of the wine. And so I think that from an organic vineyard, you get a lot more diversity, just both in terms of plant species, animals, bugs, etc., and then of course microbes as well. That's just something that I think is really nice to express in the wine.
So was that something you noticed about, for instance, you said the Chardonnay vineyard was gorgeous and you had to work with it. Was that something that you examined in depth before you started working there, or you noticed other things about what else was growing in the area that excited you?
Yeah, so I think for that site in particular, it was really just kind of the limestone soils, and then the vine age is also important to me. New Zealand is a young wine region, so it's not like, you know, we don't have very many vines that are 50, 100 years old, but these are around, all of them are between like, I would say 20 and 25, around there. And then also just the clones and the complexity of kind of the vineyard material that was in that site was really interesting as well. And then the wildlife there, they're actually surrounded by farms, so they have it's a big agricultural community, kind of like the central coast of California, and so there were like Angus cows like moving at us, so it's very pastoral, very peaceful. You see like, you know, like hawks and stuff flying around, and it's, I don't know, it's nice. It's I find it very comforting walking through vineyards like that. Conventional vineyards, you know, they have their place, I guess, but I just find it really appealing to be walking through organic vines, and it's a bit messy and a bit wild, but it's kind of nice.
Would you say the Zin parcel is also a bit messy and wild too?
Oh, sorry, can you say that one more time, Kate? I didn't hear you.
Oh yes, sorry. Would you say the the Syrah parcel is very messy as well and wild, or is it a similar? Is it similar to the Chardonnay?
Yeah, I don't know. How would you describe it? I think I'm remembering one year, because Syrah grows really, really quickly, and you have to, you know, obviously keep an eye on that. And then it had kind of like a gentle rain. This was not during the growing season. This was, well, during the growing season, not harvest. But I remember all the canopies were like growing and trying to like touch and hug each other before we, you know, quelled a little bit of their exuberance. But yeah, so you get a little bit of that, but I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yeah, I'm just kind of, yeah, I'm not really sure. This is not my specialty. Diana's the rock star when it comes to all this kind of stuff, and I'm just kind of like along for the ride. I kind of help out where I can.
Yeah.
She's like in the vineyard, in the vineyard, in the winery, and all that kind of stuff. So.
Thank you, babe. But yeah, I do think that just surrounding that site, there is kind of like a reserve kind of thing that you can kind of see, and there's lots of birds and wildlife there too. But you have to keep in mind that like New Zealand wildlife is not like California. Like we don't have like bears or anything coming through. We just have lots of birds, sometimes some rabbits.
Oh yeah, New Zealand. So little side note: New Zealand doesn't really have any native land mammals besides bats. The only native mammals here. So then we just all have birds. So
it's just lots of birds.
Yeah, whenever you're walking through, like whenever you're walking places, it's just like birds all the time. So we have different types of species of parrots, and yeah, so all sorts of different types of birds all the time. So yeah, it's always birds.
Dan Prezan actually had a question. Our rep from Illinois had a question about the Syrah. He says, you rarely see Syrah from New Zealand, especially in States. Don't think I've ever had one actually. What drew you to it? How do you see the climate contributing to the fruit and the end result of the wine?
Ooh, good questions. I love Syrah. So I think just in terms of getting introduced to Syrah from New Zealand, it's one of those varieties that we do really well down here, but people don't always get to see it. So like where we live in Waiheke, it's the Syrahs here absolutely stunning. And Hawke's Bay is particularly known for Syrah and kind of a very wide variety of styles. I like Syrah because it is this really unique grape where it does really well in cool to moderate climates. Obviously, you've got it, you know, in hot climates as well, and it has this kind of really broad range of expressions. And then I really kind of like that intersection of where there's a lot of overlap to me in the flavor profile of Syrah and Pinot Noir, especially cool climate Syrah. And so I think getting exposed to Syrah from New Zealand, it's like it's everywhere. It's like in all the wine shops. It's at the grocery store. So it's just kind of like a known variety here that I was exposed to while I was here. And then I really like cool climate Syrah a lot. So when I was in the States, I was really looking for like Syrah from like this like Sonoma region, just kind of cooler coastal areas. And then so for me, like Hawke's Bay is also a moderate to warm, cool or coastal area. So that was kind of it just seems like a perfect place for it. And then in terms of the winemaking style, I think 2022 was a cooler kind of growing season towards the end there. And so you just had this really beautiful perfumed expression of Syrah. So I wanted to show that. And then the clone that we work with is the Mass Selection clone, and it is thin skinned. And I find it's just got a really lovely fruit profile to it, flavor-wise. Yeah.
Great. A nice segue into farming and how hands-on you two are in the vineyards. Just talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah, so I think in the vineyards, the people we work with, they've been on those sites for quite some time. So I think it was really about finding people who have a similar vision for viticulture, as I do. And so I am visiting, I'm giving feedback, but at the same time, it's a lot of trust as well. And then during harvest, I am walking through every single row, going through all of the vines, just kind of really ensuring that the grapes are that we're picking is going to be what I'm after. And so then, like for 2023, I actually stayed with the people who managed the vineyard for our Syrah this year. So I was very hands-on and involved in every morning and evening with them, having breakfast and dinner and stuff, which was really nice. And just kind of because they work with several different sites, not just the one that I do. So it was nice to just kind of hear what was going on from people literally on the ground everywhere. But yeah, I think being involved is really important, and being able to kind of see and trace the vineyard over the entire growing season, because then you get an idea kind of like, you know, when I was making the 2022s, I had an idea kind of how they were going to maybe shape up kind of even before we picked. And I just think as a winemaker, it's important to know what's going on in the vineyard and be present, and I think in my mind be a little bit humble as well when you're working with growers like that. But I do also aspire to, you know, be even more involved. I would love to just, you know, have our own parcel one day, but we're a bit away from that. So
Awesome. Cool.
yeah.
So taking us from the vineyard to the cellar, let's talk a little bit about your cellar and how you found the space you work in, and what that looks like.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned before that the way we kind of found the vineyards was just by talking to people and making some friends. And that was kind of how we ended up at the facility that we are at to make wine. So we were introduced to it by, came up by a couple of people who make wine down there. And they're all kind of like smaller producers. And so getting the recommendation from them was really important as well, just to, you know, be sure that you're working at a place that knows how kind of smaller producers operate. And also, it was really important to be able to kind of do my own thing as well, and really be able to use all their equipment and stuff. But you know, I'm there like every day, all the time, and having that access was really important to me. It's like a 24-hour facility, so if I want to go back at like 10 o'clock at night or something, there's not an issue with that. Because if you don't, you know, if you don't own the facility, you're always kind of like crashing at your friend's place, and luckily they're pretty open to sharing things and being really nice and giving access like that. Yeah. In terms of what the facility looks like, it is not like, I don't know what people think wineries look like, but they are not, I would say, like a super sexy environment. I took some Instagram lives of me like in the winery during harvest in 2023. So if you want to see the unvarnished interior, you can check our Instagram page out, but it's not, I don't know. It's like there's concrete, there's like fluorescent, intense lighting. And yeah, but they have a lot of things that are really good for small scale winemaking, like smaller tanks, smaller presses. They've got a room for like temperature control for barrels, both for malolactic and to encourage fermentation. So I don't know. I think it's really nice having access to that, because otherwise I think I would just be like in a garage, which is nice, and you can definitely make wine in a garage, but it is also nice to be like, oh, I want to cool down my rosé. Can you turn on? We've got cooling. That's really nice. So,
and I think they really left you to your own devices. I mean, like you were in there kind of like doing the flip fugage and stuff like that during the like pushing down the cap and stuff. So I mean, like they really kind of let you do what you want to do when you want to do it, and they're just kind of, I think that was really important to you, just to kind of like, yeah, I think one of the things you always say is just like people just look at you sometimes just like, what are you doing now?
Yeah, I think they definitely think I'm crazy. which is fine. But they let me do my own thing, and they don't stare too much. When I was doing my Instagram videos, nobody said anything to this lady talking to herself in the tank, so that was nice.
So what is your thing? What is the benefication of each wine from start to finish?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with the Chardonnay because that's what we picked first in 2022. So for me, that was a story of that was trying to preserve the acidity in that wine. Because I was kind of wanting to leave it a little bit longer, but I noticed the acid was starting to come down, and having that freshness is really important to me. So then that was kind of what drove the picking decision. And once it came, so when we picked the wine, we were getting a mix of different clones. And so the different clones of Chardonnay obviously have different flavor profiles to them. And the ones we were working with, I didn't separate them out. They just kind of all came in together as, I guess, kind of a field blend of Chardonnay, if you will, but just kind of all together. So I didn't treat them separately. That was picked and then whole bunch pressed, and then just a little bit of settling. So basically we brought it in, squished it. The juice is coming out the press, rerun, and the pressings went to the same tank. And then the settling is just kind of like, some people do this thing where they let it settle for a really long time to get like a really, what they call like a clear juice. And there's benefits of that. And if it's super, super clear, you get these really pretty aromatics and stuff. And if it's really, really kind of not clear, it means you have lots of solids and you can get a little bit more flinty characters and other notes can come out. So what I was going for was kind of something in between. And that's because I wanted to do a wild ferment. So all my ferments are wild, so I don't inoculate with yeast. And in order to do that, you have to have food for them. And so the solids that are in the juice actually help feed the yeast, give them nutrients and things like that that they need. It also helps them form these like rafts that they need to kind of really take off and build their colonies up really, really well. So if you have a super, super clear juice, it makes it really more difficult for those yeast to kind of do their thing. So that's kind of what that looked like. And then in terms of fermentation, I did keep the temperature on the cooler side, but not like freezing. And just kind of let it do its thing in tank with some gentle aeration to encourage it to finish ferment, because there was a moment in time when it was unclear. It was always clear to me that it was going to finish fermentation, because working with wild yeast, you just have to believe, and they will find all the sugar, they will do their thing. But because it is a wild yeast population, it's not like acting on a predictable curve all the time. And so that was one where we did have to do some aeration. We did have to kind of warm it up a little bit towards the end just to kind of get it to finish fermenting, but it did. And then after that, the plan was to just kind of keep it on lease for a little bit and then put it to barrel. And then I wasn't sure what I wanted it to do from a malolactic fermentation perspective. But it made the decision for me, because it just started going through mallow. And I think it resulted in something delightful. And yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out. After ferment, it went to neutral barrels. So they were, I forget exactly how old they are, but they're at least 5 years old. So they're not imparting like any oak to the wine. And then from there, just kind of sitting in barrel, doing a little bit of batonnage for the first couple of weeks, and then kind of hands off from there. And then we go down and like I taste through all the barrels around now, actually. So October, November, just do kind of a big tasting just to kind of see where things are looking. And then was quite happy with how it was shaping up. So wanted to bottle it at that stage, just because I wanted to go for a really kind of fruit forward expression of Chardonnay. I love Chardonnay. It's one of my favorite wines to drink, grapes to work with. Again, very wide range of expressions there. But I wasn't really wanting to go for a really kind of like toasty, really full-bodied, like, shoulder pad 80s style Chardonnay kind of thing. I wanted it to be really aromatic. And I sometimes people are like, I will drink anything but Chardonnay. So I was also kind of sensitive to wanting people not to just see Chardonnay on the label and then just be like, I won't drink that. Which is why we kind of just labeled it just a white wine to kind of give people the opportunity to experience it without that kind of judgment, I guess. And I think it does surprise a lot of people, who haven't had a Chardonnay like that before. The Syrah, I have to remember, it was different vintage than this year. It was starting to do this thing. We picked it much after the Chardonnay, like a couple weeks later. And the season was kind of shifting into being a little bit cooler. So when we were picking the Chardonnay, it was really sunny, really warm, kind of what you were expecting. But as the weeks kind of went on, it started getting a little bit cooler, I would say a bit earlier than usual. And so I was kind of like, okay, I made the call just to pick it and bring it in at that point. I wasn't really sure it was going to benefit from more time on the vine, and just kind of made that decision to bring it in. And before bringing it in, like I said, go through all the rows and drop anything I didn't want. So any green bunches or anything like that didn't go in. And what was kind of surprising to me from that wine is, when you go through winemaking school, and kind of common wisdom is that if your wine is like under 13.5, it's going to be green or something like that. But this wine is sitting at like 12.5 and is not green at all, which that was kind of a nice thing to discover, kind of making this wine, is that you can really achieve these really complex flavors and things like that at an alcohol that I think is really approachable for a lot of people. So anyway, so picked the wine, and then destemmed, so there's no whole bunch in this at all. I did do a little bit of a starter culture for this, so like a Pied Cuvée. So then I did pick some of the bunches that I really wanted to kind of kick off the ferment, squish those up. So I guess there's like maybe like 0.5% whole bunch in the wine as a result of that, to get some of the stems in there. And really just, again, kind of like left it to its own devices. But after, I think, like day 2, tipped in the starter culture, to kind of help encourage the fermentation to really kind of get going. And then in terms of the cap management, so when you're fermenting red wine, the skins, okay, so red wine is on the skins. We don't press it or anything. So you've got all the skins and solids and all the stuff going on in there. As fermentation happens, carbon dioxide is released, and so it pushes all the skins up to the top. And it's important to kind of reincorporate them back into the liquid, to get better color, you get different flavors, and then also it kind of helps prevent any funky stuff go on. If you just leave it at the top, it gets weird. So then for cap management, which is what we call that, kind of pushing down the skins and seeds, there's a few different approaches. And then I chose to go with kind of very gentle handling. I worked at did a harvest down in Central Otago, working with a Pinot Noir producer. And then when I did vintage in Sonoma, I was also working with a Pinot Noir and Syrah producer. And then I think Syrah can handle a lot of, kind of aggressive handling. But again, I thought it was a year to do a bit more of a Pinot Noir-like approach. So very gentle punch downs by hand and foot for me. I like getting into the tank. One, I think it's frankly easier for me to punch down that way. And then 2, it's also that I get a better interaction with the temperature of the ferment, and it kind of helps me know what's going on with it from a more tactile perspective, I guess, than if you just put a thermometer in there. And it was also something that I did down in Central Otago, and I was like, I think this is something I really I enjoyed, both just from seeing the extraction of the color, just punching down the cap, but then also just kind of getting that extra bit of feedback on the ferment and how it's going. And then did that for kind of while it's going through peak fermentation. And then when it was kind of, I was worried about getting too much tannin, too much extraction in the wine, would do some gentle kind of like pump over kind of things. But again, nothing super aggressive. We weren't like, it's not like a fire hose when you do that. Sometimes it is, but not this time. And then towards the end, just when it was done fermenting, just putting, so you call kind of gassing it up, so like dry ice, keeping it wrapped, and then just tasting every day until the tannin profile was what I wanted. Which again, I saw that from a lot of kind of really Pinot Noir producers that I work with were doing that. And I think it's really important because there is this like, I can pull up, like there's research studies on this as well, but the tannin profile really does shift a lot through the course of winemaking and aging on skins. And so then there's this kind of point where it's all for me kind of synthesizing and coming together, and it's kind of exactly what I'm looking for. And then you can press it off then, or if you miss that point, that's okay. You can just wait and it'll come back around, but you may have to wait like a few extra weeks. And when you're making a wine, kind of like I do, that is, wild yeast fermented, not heaps of sulfur, it is a bit, for me, I think I would have a lot of anxiety if I left it on skins for a really long time. That's just a personal thing. So getting it kind of in that moment was important for me. So then pressed it off and then put it to barrel, and then just kind of left it to its own thing. It did start going through mallow after that. So that was really nice. Didn't have to inoculate or wait too long. It did the same thing again for 2023. So I think there's something about that block. The barrels are also older barrels. So I don't know if there's like some residual community that's just really hardy and resists cleaning methods like steam and stuff. I have no idea, but I went through mallow. And then after that, again, kind of did a big barrel tasting and decided that, I don't think I wanted to make just kind of a really approachable, light-bodied style, really beautiful, cool expression of Syrah. And I just, wanted to preserve a lot of that really nice fruit aroma in the wine. And I thought further barrel aging was going to just make it a little, I just wanted to capture that moment basically. So bottled it in December. Yeah, it was December when we bottled that. Yeah.
Cool.
I'm trying to think if I forgot anything. It's difficult to kind of go back.
Yeah, that was super thorough and exactly what I was hoping you would do, so that we can share that with everybody. I had a question also, for the record, shoulder pad Chardonnay is going to live in my brain forever. Rent-free. Question about your taste in wine for the both of you. What are you looking for in terms of palate, and also what are some of your most influential winemakers or wines that you've had that have led you on this journey?
Oh man, I think from my background as a somm, I've tried lots of wines. Like I was a wine buyer for a couple of restaurants, and just beverage in general. So I think from a palate and flavor perspective, I have literally tried that definitely thousands. I don't know if it's tens of thousands, lots of wines, all different styles, all around the world. That's a very thing I'm very fortunate to have had that exposure to. And so also when I was working at Lula Cafe in Chicago in particular, I was working on and running like a very kind of low intervention biodynamic wine list. And people would bring me literally everything from everywhere. So I think just having that exposure, I think what I gravitated to the most were wines where they're really interesting, they're really cool, but then like, because we were getting people coming in from all over, kind of all walks of life. But it was really important for me that you have something that, like, if my mom came into the restaurant, she could enjoy it. Or just really anyone can find something that they like about it. And so if they want to get really nerdy and, you know, talk about wild fermentation, you know, low intervention winemaking, they can kind of connect with it on that level. But at the same time, if they're just, you know, opening the bottle, they just don't know any of that and they're just tasting it, that they can still find joy in the wine. And so I think for me, making a wine that is really expressive aromatically is important to kind of draws people in. And then texturally on the palate, I personally just kind of like light to medium bodied wines. Those really kind of chewy, full bodied wines I do enjoy, but you know, typically it's just a glass or two and then I'm okay. And then for white wine, I kind of like everything. I think Frank's definitely more of an acid freak.
Yeah.
So like bone dry Rieslings are for Frank. I need something with a little bit more give, acid, but a little bit of body and give. But I think having those kind of core components are important for longevity in the wine and to give the wine balance. Because I think even people who don't know how to describe those terms can still know when something's out of balance. And then in terms of like influential winemakers, oh my God, there's like too many. I know I'm going to forget people. So if I forgot you, I'm very, very sorry. But I think some of the really important ones to me are also places I visited. So I've visited lots of wine regions in the US. And I think like one of the places I went to that was really cool was Kathy Corison. So for Corison Wines in California, she makes absolutely gorgeous Napa Cabernet. I went to visit her. She was just so nice. And I don't know how we got to talking, but she like showed me the vines and it was just a really cool experience. And I think, you know, Napa Valley Cabernet, you know, it can be really big and really in your face and super intense. But her wines always just have this really lovely elegance, and somehow they're both heavy and light. I call it like the hippo doing ballet, and I describe Grenache like that as well, because Grenache is also one of my favorite varieties, but it's just achieving this like really kind of full-bodied wine, but it's still really balanced. And then up in Sonoma, maybe it wasn't Sonoma, but Snowden Vineyard, was visiting them. That was good. And then Literai, that was absolutely amazing. Getting a tour of that place and just really kind of, I don't do any biodynamics and I'm not going to get into it. But I think just seeing the vineyard and just the thought and that they're basically have built an entire ecosystem out there for the benefit of the vines and the wine, that was just really cool. And I think really influenced me in terms of just, this was before I was a winemaker, this was just when I was like a somm. But just really the importance of the vineyard and just all those decisions kind of going into the bottle. And then down in New Zealand, oh my gosh, so many people. Probably, I live on Waiheke, and one of the winemakers from Kennedy Point, Randall, he also does a really good job of making really elegant Syrah, Cabernet, and Chardonnays. And I was talking to him about like my first vintage. It's a really tight-knit community over here. And I was telling him, I was like, yeah, you know, decided to bottle the wine, and you know, everybody's like, oh, you know, Hawke's Bay Syrah needs like 2 years in barrel, and I'm like, I don't really think so. And he was like, fuck them, and I was like, thanks, man. He's like, the only one who knows your wine is you, and I'm like, thank you for reaffirming that. So I'll call him out, and then again, just Mount Edward and Duncan down in Central Otago, also low intervention. Pinot Noir producer down there, went down, did vintage with him and his team for a bit and learned so much from him. I mean, he was one of the, he didn't like start the region obviously, but he's been making wine down there for a long time, helping people with their vineyards, and just his perspective on winemaking is really cool. But not just from a making low intervention wine, but then also like, selling it. And yeah, just hearing his approach to winemaking, and also the vineyard side was really cool. And he took me out to his sites and was just kind of taking me through, again, the viticulture side of things, and then his approach to the winery and stuff. I would say those people, but there's so many. Amy from McBride Sisters, she's the head winemaker over there, very good mentor. But just, yeah, so many people. So if I didn't mention you,
I think there's a lot of people that help us get started in Hawks Bay.
Oh my God,
like that,
yeah.
to get this advice about.
Amy, yeah, I was gonna say Amy and Ollie from Halcyon Days, very influential in helping. She actually was the one who put us in contact with the winery that we work at. Amy from Amwaz, also very influential. She spent like an hour talking to me on the phone about, because she used to work at that winery as well, working with them. Dan from Decibel Wines, also an expat. He's from Philly, doing wine down there, hooking me up with people. It's just, just so many amazing people. Holly from Three Fates, who I went to uni with, who's also making wine down there, but she's from there. So I don't know. So many people. It's just such a nice community and just so supportive. Like I definitely don't think I could do this like without that community down there at all. Just because it's just so lovely. Collaborative too. So.
I'm gonna leave it open on the comments on YouTube for just a moment longer. So if folks have comments that haven't yet, now's the time. But in the meantime, I'll ask my colleagues here, James and Nadim, do you two have any questions for these guys before we sign off?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while. I was a big fan of Chardonnay myself, still am. And I was just curious, it's like such a transmutable grape, like it reflects so many different terroirs. If you could talk a little bit about some of the soil and terroir of Hawks Bay and how you feel that sort of injects itself into the style of the wine.
Yeah, that is a good point. So Chardonnay is kind of this chameleon where you can kind of, in the winery, you can really kind of make it what you want in terms of using mellow and oak and everything like that, and it can definitely handle that. But in terms of the terroir for Hawks Bay, I think the limestone site that we work with is really cool. There's not a lot of limestone down there. It's mostly alluvials and gravels and like kind of old riverbed kind of stuff. So just finding that site, and I think what it does is it really helps with kind of the, you basically, when you're growing the vines and things like that, you need something that can retain water, but isn't going to be waterlogged. That's going to be really great for growing conditions for the vines. And I think like chalk and limestone are kind of perfect for that. In terms of like the whole like minerality thing, I don't personally think that it's giving it a lot of minerality, but I think that it is giving it a lot of depth and complexity to the wine. And I think that there is something compelling about Chardonnay on limestone soils. I think that there's a reason why that's a thing. Now, can we measure that in a lab? I have no idea, but I definitely think that it is really impactful for the vines. But then I also think that, like, going back to the Syrah that is on kind of old riverbed, so alluvials, a little bit of clay and sand and stuff. And I think that there is something about that kind of soil mixture that gives it a really kind of perfumed aromatics and makes it really kind of giving, which I like, and I think it does influence the tannin structure as well.
The whole Hawks Bay region is very kind of like coastal. I mean, New Zealand is basically New Zealand is like if you took Colorado by like the corners and stretched it out. It's about the same kind of like square miles as like Colorado and stuff like that. So then, pretty much every wine region is pretty coastal except for maybe Central Otago. But
yeah, that's like considered inland, but like you can still drive to the ocean in like an hour.
Yeah, but like Hawks Bay is like right next to the coast, so it's like really kind of like coastally influenced and stuff like that. So I think the Chardonnay, they're both pretty similar distances to the coast. Maybe the Chardonnay is a little bit closer.
They're both about 20 kilometers from the coast, which in miles, it's like 10 miles. Is that 10 miles? Like 12 miles?
Like 12 miles.
It's like 12 miles inland. It takes like, yeah. So if you wanted to go to the beach and go to the wine or like go to the vineyard, you could do that in like 20, 30 minutes. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's a cool spot.
We have another comment, not so much a question, from Dan. He says, for Frank, Dave from Cherry Circle Room says hi. His wine shop bar just opened and he's excited to have Responsible Hedonist in stock.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I worked at Cherry Circle Room for a little bit, and yeah, thanks for the shout out. Yeah, I think I worked there and at City Winery, and Chicago just has like an amazing, just kind of like group of people and in the kind of like restaurant industry and stuff like that. And we have like so many good friends there. So when we went back in June, that was really great to kind of like make those connections and kind of share like our wine with everybody, because it really is like a passion project, you know.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. So it's really cool to kind of like, you know, this idea that Diana had to come to make wine on the complete opposite side of the world. And then, you know, I think their initial plans were to stay down here for like 3 years.
Yeah, and then go back.
Yeah, and go back and then maybe, you know, and try to make wine in the USA somewhere. But we just fell in love with the wine regions and the people and everything here, and we just decided to make it work. So it's just cool that now we can share this with everybody. So it's just cool that, you know, you guys are bringing it into the USA and, you know, like letting people enjoy it. So it's really cool.
Yeah, we're so excited to be working with you. And for those of you who are just now tuning in, Responsible Hedonist, they've arrived officially in New York and Illinois. So please contact your rep to taste if you haven't yet already. Is there anything else anyone would like to say before we sign off for the evening or morning for you guys?
No, this has been great. Always nice to talk about the wine, and just let us know if you want to catch up again. But otherwise, it's been great. Nice way to start off this Saturday morning.
What, Nadim?
I say come back and see us soon.
Yes.
Yeah, we will.
Okay, thank you all so much. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.